All right, let's kick this off. This is another episode of Acceptable Accuracy's head-to-head series. Today, we are talking about LPVO versus red dot with magnifier, specifically as it applies to competition.
What's an LPVO?
LPVO, it's funny because as I was giving the introduction, I almost stopped. You can actually hear the slight pause there, but I almost stopped to say what it was. For those who don't know, an LPVO is a low power variable optic, which is traditionally a 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 10 optic that you almost always find on some kind of carbine, usually with like a 5.56 AR-15. Sometimes they'll put them on like a battle rifle, quote unquote battle rifle, 308, 6.5 Creedmoor.
Mm-hmm.
But given those have a little bit longer range, usually have a little more magnification on that. But the reason why we have LPVOs that are 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 10 is that at those distances, you're going to get the magnification that is most suitable for the 5.56 caliber,
There's
right?
a 1 to 10 LPVO. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a few of the like high-end brands now that have it. There's some debate on whether they're actually effective or not because anytime you have glass that magnifies that much, you're compromising your 1x to the point where it may not be usable again.
Mm,
But that being said, you can spend as much money as you want, and you can probably get something that'll be a 1 to 10 with superior glass
that's,
versus
yeah.
like a more affordable 1 to 6. But
I mean, kind of going back to LPVO versus red dot. I mean, end of the day, with firearms, you can go anywhere from dirt cheap to crazy bougie expensive. So I mean, end of the day, you're probably looking around the same price with each other, aren't you? Looking at tiers, I guess.
yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're trying to match like with like, this also makes it a little bit harder because of the reasons we'll get into for optical clarity primarily.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I want to talk about before we really get into this is the use, why an LPVO, why magnification at all in competition, I guess is the question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do we need to go beyond just a red dot?
Yeah.
And I think the answer for that is there are not every competition requires you to go beyond like a fixed like 1x. I'm using bunny ears, you can't see it, but 1x red dot, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anything that you're shooting from a competition perspective that goes beyond 200 yards, you really start needing to have some kind of magnification.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your targets are massive at 300, 400 yards, like you don't need it. But a lot of times with competition, you're going to be shooting man-sized steel at 300 and beyond. And at that point, realistically, a 1x magnification or like a fixed magnification, I guess 1x is the proper term, is not going to cut it. You're just
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to see that target well enough to be able to make a hit with a red dot.
Mm-hmm.
So you start having the need of magnification behind it. And what that gets you is obviously the ability to see the targets that you're shooting at uh, in front of you, zoomed in, based on the magnification of the
Mm-hmm.
optic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of jump the gun here. Like for
Yeah.
you, Phil, personally, which one would you pick?
Okay. So this has been a this has been a debate in my brain, and actually, this is why we're talking about this today. Because I have been going back and forth about what we're going to use at the Zombie Invitational coming up this fall.
Uh-huh.
So that is a competition that does shoot out to 500.
And be
And they,
and be on the lookout for that podcast coming up.
yep, yeah, we'll have a whole series on preparing for it. And then,
Oh yeah.
yep. Uh, so that you go out to 500, and then there are some rifle targets even at 200 that get a little bit smaller in size. That is nice to have magnification for.
Hmm.
And now I've completely forgot your original question.
which one?
Oh, yes, it's funny,
Literally,
and
which one?
it's funny because I feel bad about forgetting that because that's literally the question of this
It
podcast is which
really
one.
is, man.
I know. So, for me personally, I have asked myself this, and I've actually bounced back and forth between the two of them, and
Mhm.
I have been shooting long enough at this point where the technology between the two continues to leapfrog each other, and that question is never really truly answered.
Yep.
But I will make a answer for the Zombie Invitational at the end of this podcast because it's a
Okay.
very specific need.
That's fair.
So, but I've done both, and I have
Mhm.
both. The red dot LPVO combination I have currently is a little bit aged compared to the LPVO I have.
Gotcha.
But what are your thoughts, Tyler? Which do you prefer?
Dude, same exactly. I'm the kind of the same way. It I'm just gonna borrow the answer from John Lovell of whichever one I shot last.
That's fair.
It really is. It's because as of right now, on my competition rifle, it's a or pistol. My competition 5.56 pistol. It's a I have a LPVO on it. It's a primary arms 1 to 6 LPVO, and I love that thing. But there are times when I've had a red dot on that thing with a 3x Hollis magnifier, and I love that thing. It's just right now. I've had days where I've wanted to take the LPVO off and to throw a red dot magnifier on it, but a part of me doesn't want to do it because I'm too lazy to remount it later on. If I feel like I want to switch back, which is why I feel like the answer should be just get another upper and just put a red dot magnifier and just switch when I feel like it.
I know that's if you're shoot depends what you're shooting for an upper, right?
It's so true.
For me, like I'm my competition upper is bougie because
Yes.
I do
Hmm.
have it specifically set up to use with suppressors. So realistically, like dropping another $900 on an upper is just not realistic for me. Whereas like if I were to just swap out a PSA upper, which is really not a
Yes.
bad idea, especially if I'm not
No.
shooting suppressed, then um putting a like having a separate upper with the separate optical setup is not a bad idea. It's not unobtainable, right?
No. Exactly. And that's the beauty of PSA. I know PSA sponsor us, by the way. We love you, but it's true. Like I remember there was a podcast that came out a while ago, right after Shot Show. How what was it? The founder and CEO of Shot Show basically said like we want to get ARs and guns in the hands of as many Americans as possible. It's because of one day. I don't want to say if, but when the government tries to make it so expensive or impossible, like America's so well armed, it's like yeah, what are you going to do now? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
it's prolific.
yeah, exactly. So it's just at that point, it's like, yeah, just get another upper, because I use PSA. That is I use a PSA, like AR-15. Like, yes, I've replaced some parts, but over end of the day, it's still a PSA. So all that to say, like right now, I'm using LPVO, but I've been very tempted to go back to a red dot magnifier many, many times because I don't know. This just I missed the dot. I love the quick site acquisition, man. I miss that a lot.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit then of the advantages of and I guess advantages and disadvantages. So I kind of came up with a list to step through to help us in our
Mhm,
audience to kind of figure out where the advantages and disadvantages of having a LPVO versus red dot with magnifier are.
mhm,
So kind of stepping right into it because something we're trying to get better at is getting like right into the heart of the topic. But the first item is weight.
mhm.
This hands down goes to a red dot with magnifier. So I started looking into it, and before I really dig into this too, I pulled up two what I would consider competition acceptable setups for LPVO versus a red dot with a magnifier.
Mhm.
And Tyler, you can talk about your LPVO as well too. This just happens to be the one that I use.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So looking at the weight wise, so I have a Trijicon Credo HX 1 to 6. I love the thing. It is really clear. It's got daylight, bright, red dot on it, but it alone weighs 1.9 ounces. And then with a mount, like you get that mount itself is 1.8. I use a worn high mount, and then the total weight is 26.7 ounces, which is quite a bit. That's a lot of weight to add on to your rifle.
Hmm.
Whereas with the hollow sun, which is my second like option, because I used to shoot a lot of hollow suns. Um, the one we picked was or at least I picked was the Hollow Sun 503G ACSS, and we'll get into the reason why we picked that one in a bit. But that thing weighs 4.8 ounces. It's nothing.
Hmm.
That is featherweight on your rifle. And then if you toss a primary arms GLX 6X behind it, again because you're trying to mimic the same magnification, you're looking at 7.2 for that magnifier with a total of 12 ounces roughly. And if you go with a more expensive EOTech, which is a little bit more heavier, that magnifier alone is 12.8 ounces. You're looking at 17.65 ounces. So no matter what, and I don't know if these numbers for those second items includes the mounts or not. Even if they do, it's still gonna be lower. You're looking
Hmm.
at 26 ounces versus 12 and 17 ounces.
Oh, for sure.
That is a significant difference on your rifle.
It is. I mean, I just looked up my LPVO. It's a primary arms SLX 1 to 6, and that alone is like 17 ounces. That's 16.9 ounces.
Yep.
So it's already heavier, or if not around the same as what a red dot magnifier would be. And that's without the actual mount. That's just LPVO itself, w- without the scope caps and throw lever.
Yeah. And I would argue that you know, everybody's different, right? And I've watched a few videos on this, just kind of like figuring out how fast the difference is. But for me, having a lighter rifle is always significantly faster for me,
Oh, of course.
transitioning from target to target. That is why weight is important. Plus, if you're carrying it around, you're shooting a match all day, that weight is going to add up over time. But I shot a lot of Steel Challenge, like I wouldn't say early on in my shooting career, but like within the past like 4 years, I shot a lot of Steel Challenge. Not quite as much anymore, but I ran the lightest red dot I could get on my rifle so that I could tear from target to target as quickly as possible,
Hmm.
and it makes a difference from target transitioning with a lighter weight rifle.
Hmm.
So I guess I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on weight and if it does that matter to you, Tyler.
Man, I feel like at this point I've shot with my LPVO for so long that I don't remember. I hate to say that because once again, I've just been so. l- I'll admit, I've just been lazy. I just don't want to switch back to as much as I love a red dot. I feel like I just have like red dot envy sometimes. I'm like, man, I
I
should just
know.
do it because I know it's lighter, it's easier, but at the same time, like I don't. From what I remember, the weight itself didn't affect me too much. For me, I think it was just more the bulk
Yeah.
aspect
Yes.
because a red dot magnifier, it just seems more bulky, as weird as it is to say.
Yeah.
And I think I only say that because when you have a magnifier, the way that it is of course it flips to the side. And for me, being a left handed person, it flips out to the left. And now you have this magnifier that's just on the left side in my peripheral, kind of in my way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it just feels bulky. And of course, even for storage sake, it's just kind of annoying. Now, I know there is a way to fix that, and that would be to get a Unity mount, and that would be a riser. So now you're adding more cost to it. But that's really cool because the way that you would, because it rises the magnifier more, instead of the magnifier going out to the side, it actually goes down and now it's like parallel with the rifle. So no matter what, your magnifier is always parallel. It stays down or it's right in line with your red dot,
Yeah.
which I think is super cool. I would love to do that at the same time, but I don't know if I want to spend an extra what 500-600 bucks just for mounts.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That does add cost. So if you do
yes.
really look to like min max your setup and you're adding that Unity mount, you're gonna spike up to like, and we'll get into cost here just in a second, because I forgot to put that on my list. But yeah, it does add. It does add
Yep.
up to the cost,
Yeah,
right?
I'm looking.
And
It's
the other
literally
thing,
600 bucks extra, 500-600 bucks extra.
The other thing I was thinking about too was depending on the competition, and I can't remember if Zombie allows this. I feel like they do. As long as you carry it with you, you're allowed to use it. But let's say that you have a stage specifically that is all close in. You just pull that LPVO. I'm sorry, the LPVO. You pull the magnifier right off from behind your red dot and toss it in your bag
Oh, mm-hmm,
or on your equipment. And
mm-hmm.
now you've lightened up your rifle even more, and you've removed the bulk, and you have what I prefer. It gives me a lot of when I'm behind like a red dot and they're mounted forward and it's a smaller red dot, I feel like I just have a lot more peripheral view. I have a lot more command over the stage
Oh, of course.
in what I'm looking at next, and I feel like I have less issues with the optical, like, or with the eye relief, which we'll get into
Yes,
as well. But for me, it feels freeing
it
to have
does.
just that.
Well, because even you and I have spoken about this outside of podcasting, how for me, I like just the nice, simple dot, like that nice, crisp dot, because
Yep.
my concealed carry pistol, my regular gun, my War Poet has the ACSS Vulcan on it, and I'm not a big fan of the chevron. I feel like it's
Yeah.
just really big. My brain doesn't work well with the point. And now that I think about it, my LPVO has the same chevron as well, and I feel like there's just so much there that my brain's like, what is going on? What do I actually aim at?
Yeah.
Versus the simple dot. I know some red dots have like the dot and kind of like, was it the circle on the outside with like the what, so I can't remember what it's called. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Like the donut of death.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, but either way, like because of that, like I know you prefer it on on your red dots for your
Yeah.
AR. I
I do.
don't. I don't like it. I feel like it's just in the way. It just adds extra distractions. I'd rather just have the nice, crisp dot, and that's it.
Interesting. Yeah, I always feel like that donut frames things for me, especially steel challenge. 'Cause you're shooting a lot of spherical plates, but
Gotcha.
I don't. For some reason, it really frames stuff for me and helps me, like, my brain functions that way.
That makes sense.
Which I guess steps us into our next line item. And I'm gonna actually combine a couple of these together. Is brightness and optical clarity.
Hmm.
So these are kind of exclusive things, but they do kind of like the output of. Okay, well, let's just get right into it. So no matter what, you're typically going to be able to have your red dots can be significantly brighter than your LPVO.
Oh yeah.
I do have a daylight. Like the only reason I went with the Trijicon that I did is because it does have a daylight bright dot,
Mm-hmm.
so that really helps. But it's never going to be as good as a red dot
No.
from a brightness perspective. And that's, I think, where the superior, like up close with a red dot, you're always going to be better than an LPVO just because it's a lot faster because of the brightness.
Oh
And
yeah.
your eyes drawn to it naturally.
Yes.
So along with that, one of the challenges is okay. Actually, let me step back a second. So if you can get a daylight bright, and there's a lot of crossover between the different light like items we have on this list. If you can get a daylight bright, I'm gonna say this for later. I feel like we're jumping all over. Anyway, brightness, red dot, hands down. Optical clarity, because of the way that a red dot is projected on the glass, is you almost always have a blue or a green hue within your red dot. For some people, that drives them crazy. For me, it does not matter, and
I was about
I do not care.
I kind of forgot about that. Yeah, I think my Holosens do have a bluish glare, doesn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't bother me. I know there's like
Hmm.
some like the early Trijicon RMRs were like in order to get really long battery life, they had like a really blue glass and it was driving people crazy.
Yeah,
It wasn't as clear, but I
and
don't know.
the
For
only,
like the Hollow Suns, it doesn't bother me.
yeah, but at the same time too, like I look at thinking of optical clarity, I look at an LPVO, and the 1x isn't truly a 1x. It's like a 1.1 for most, isn't it?
Yeah, and no matter what, too, your objective lens is going to be
Yeah.
like further away from you, most likely, than your red dot is.
Mm-hmm.
But because where you're looking at it, so where you look into the like when you look into a LPVO,
Mm-hmm.
the glass that you're getting is like right there in front of your eye, and that's where the magnification is. But then, like the way that the light comes in and the actual like way you view it is further out in front of the object. So yeah, no matter what, you have magnification. You're not getting a true 1x.
Hmm. Exactly. So because of the man, dude, I feel like the more I talk about this, the more I'm like, why do I have LPVO on?
I know. I'm telling you, there right now LPVO is not
Oh,
looking great.
it's not. I feel, dude. I know we're only like halfway through our list, but I feel like in a comp, at least in a competition context, I feel like I would prefer a red dot. But because my context is more than competition, that's why I don't. I keep LPVO on for the
I know.
tiny little chance of an EMP. Yes,
Yes.
I'm paranoid.
Yeah. So that is actually a great. Okay. Just real quick on the optical clarity, LPVO, because you have an etched reticle.
Yes,
Typically, your glass is going to be very clear,
yes.
and even with like my Trichicon that has a like a red dot in the center, the way that they project that dot is different than uh, a red dot, like a traditional red dot. It's still the glass is very clear.
Hmm.
Hands down, you're going to get much clearer glass, which can help at long range, depending on like the contrast of your target. So let's say you are shooting something that is green painted or is shot up and it's like a darker color because it's been shot all day long and not repainted.
Hmm.
You are going to be able to distinguish with a clearer set of glass, especially at long distance. You are going to be able to distinguish a target much easier with a LPVO that has good clear glass on it than a red dot all day long.
Hmm.
So that is one advantage for
Oh, for
sure.
sure. Yeah.
Um, all right, and you were making a comment, and I completely forgot what it
That's
was.
about EMP, bro.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. I'm so glad that you're here, Tyler, because I'm like forgetting things that we said like 2 seconds ago. This is why I take notes. Uh,
The irony is I don't take notes.
the
You look at our notes, Phil's got like he's got like everything, and I'm just showing. I was like, all right, hey, I'm like, I just like whatever I shot last, and
I
the
know
more I talk about it, which is hilarious because whenever I do speeches or sermons, I write everything I say. For this, I'm like, oh, let's just do it. I just jump right in. It's so weird, man.
it's all good. Um, So okay, so EMP aside,
Yep.
like EMP hits, your red dots, its red dot is just a paperweight at that point, right? Because the
Oh yeah.
electronics inside of it are fried.
Yep.
Now, I less likely or more likely thing to happen is that your battery dies on your LPVO or your red dot,
Yep.
right? Now, the battery life on LPVO is tiny compared to a red dot. Those
Dude.
things run forever.
Mm-hmm.
And like even the hollow suns technically if your battery is dead, it'll still run off of like the solar panel
Nah.
on top of it, but
Uh,
it's very dim and it's not that great.
no.
It's more of a yeah,
It,
it's kind of a, it's not it's it
I've got
it
my
is
own
it is what it
comments,
is.
but I digress with those comments.
Yeah, it is what it is. But
Hmm.
again, if your battery dies, your LPVO is still usable. If battery dies on your red dot, it is no longer usable. But if you're looking at red dot with just a dot, there are some that like nowadays we are living in a golden age of lifetime for batteries. You're looking at 500,000 hours,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of these have shake awake, so if you forget to turn it off, it doesn't matter. It'll put itself to sleep until it's moved, and then it
Yep.
turns on immediately. Even with the circle dot on, which I prefer, it's still like 20,000 hours, which is
Hmm.
ridiculous. I think I had my first Hollow Sun red dot. I used it for like 4 years.
That's
And I
insane.
would turn the thing on and off before I even thought about replacing the battery. And the only reason I replaced the battery was because I was replacing the battery in something else that had died. Actually, I think it was an LPVO. And I was like, oh, I should probably replace this battery. So I did.
That's crazy. Yeah, I've had, and that's the thing too. Exactly, because my Hollow Sun is a shake awake, so I can't remember when the last. I think I just replace them once a year, just because I'm like, I probably should.
You do it on your birthday.
Exactly. Whereas like my LPVO, that thing has died, and part of it too is because it's with a turn knob too, so it stays on forever. So one time I turned it on, forgot about it, and it was dead. Or I had a new battery used at the beginning of the range day, and towards the end it was already starting to dim. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a big fan of that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's tough because then you're like between stages, you're having to remember to turn the thing on and off. And I've forgotten before for sure with my
exactly.
LPVO. And you're looking at battery life for those in the hundreds of hours
Yeah.
versus like the thousands of hours on a red dot.
Hmm.
Okay. All right. So moving on to eye relief and eye box. So prior to this,
I'll say, do we really need to talk about that? I feel like
yeah,
the answer's pretty obvious. Which one's better?
well, that's more nuanced than you think. But I'm gonna let you get into it real quick. Before we do that, I'll explain the difference between eye relief and eye box.
Go for it.
So eye relief is the distance from your face or your eyeball, I guess, that you're able to see into the optic that you're using without it being like basically having scope shadow on either side
Mm-hmm.
of it. So if you're too close, all you're gonna see is black. If you're too far away, same problem. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're within the eye relief space, which again, the higher quality your LPVO, the larger that distance, I should say, the greater the distance is from. Okay, so for example, I forget what the Trichicon is, but it's like 3.5, let's say, but up to 3.9. So during that inches, so during that space, like I am able to see down my scope at 1x especially with no problems whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So set it up, gives you pretty forgiving ability to see in that eye relief space without getting like seeing like just black in front of
Yeah.
you. So eye box is your ability to move side to side or up and down in without having to see the same thing where you're basically all you get is black. All you see is black from you basically looking at the side of the tube inside the scope.
Mm-hmm.
So those are accomplished a few different ways. There's not really a great way to measure eye box. People tend to get eye box and eye relief confused.
Mm-hmm.
No manufacturer really talks about eye box, but there is definitely a notable difference between a high quality optic eye box and a low quality optic eye box.
For sure.
But
That makes
but usually
sense.
it has to do with the like diameter of the glass and again the quality of the glass and the length of
Mm-hmm.
the tube. So why is this important, Tyler?
Well, you got to be able to see.
Right.
You got to be able to actually get your dot or reticle or whatever on your target so you're able to, well, of course, target focus. That's why we choose these types of optics versus iron sights. Right, Brian? Love you, brother. But but yeah, so of course you need to be able to get your dot or reticle on top of it so you're able to fire. And of course now we're talking about, I mean, we could even get into parallax, which is another reason why I just feel like you have red dot that's just superior in this aspect, at least in general. I mean, I guess depending on how much money you're willing to spend, but I think more if you're looking at more like budget to mid tier, it's just I feel like that's just no question. Now, of course, once you get into the magnifier aspect, I'm just talking about just red dot by
Right.
itself. Of
Yep.
course, once you get into magnifier, that's where you get a little more, like you said, more nuanced because, of course, now you're dealing with that scope shadow, trying to deal with the eye relief and the eye box. So I definitely get and respect that. But I mean, overall, if you're shooting 200 yards and in, you can't beat a red dot with speed and and target acquisition, sight acquisition.
Yeah,
So,
because in theory, like red dot has no eye relief or has
hmm,
infinite eye relief,
yeah,
and an infinite eye box. Or
yes,
not, and sorry, not that's wrong. I'm saying it wrong. The eye box is massive
I
because
knew what you meant, but
the tube
yes,
is the tube is so short.
yes,
Like you'd have to really try to like not be able to see
hmm,
the dot. What's really interesting is I was watching a video that from a channel that is kind of now defunct that actually was talking about the same thing. It's called Superset CA, and um, even if you're off slightly and you have both eyes open and you're complete scope shadow, you can still see like the dot inside of an LPVO if it's bright enough, and you can actually still make shots that way,
hmm,
even though it's completely like blacked out. It's not great, but I digress.
hmm,
Anyway, so again with the red dot, no problems with eye relief, no problems with eye box. A parallax is like quote unquote infinite and not an issue where you're dealing with all of those in LPVO.
hmm,
Now, if you get a good quality LPVO, it's set up correctly, you're going to be behind the LPVO and you're going to be able to reproduce the exact same head position every time and not be an issue, especially on 1X. And there are some like good quality LPVOs, including the Trigicon that I have, that you can shoot with both eyes open in effectively, which is typically only reserved to uh, an LP or sorry, a red dot. But again, because of that 1.1 plus magnification, you're not really getting a true 1x. Your eyes are slightly off, so that causes some weird, like, mental issues that you have to work through.
Hmm.
But and what Tyler said is once you put a magnifier behind a red dot, all of that changes, and you've now lost the advantage that having a red dot has.
Hmm.
And in some regards, it's even worse. Uh,
Yeah.
magnifiers have improved a lot when it comes to iBox, but you are still looking through multiple tubes that add length to try to avoid like getting out of the space of the iBox. Eye relief traditionally on a magnifier is shorter, but that's okay because in AR you can set it up to be closer to your eye, and it really doesn't be it's not an issue as like if you get it set up properly.
Hmm.
But iBox is definitely typically not as good as it is on LPVO. Um, and again, along the optical clarity thing, when you're looking through a magnifier, you're looking through all the glass in the magnifier and all the glass in the red dot, and
Hmm.
you're just not going to get as clear of a picture. And again, it's gonna be harder to line up behind. So I guess I'm curious if you have anything to add on that, Tyler, from a magnifier use and iBox and eye relief.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, that's where a red dot is just so superior in so many ways. But the moment you get that magnifier in there, it's like, I think as we excel or move forward, innovate in this area, that's where I think I don't know. We'll see because it definitely does intrigue me to see. Because right now, like Holson just came out with their 6x magnifier. I don't have it, so I have no idea.
Yep.
And I know Holson. It's very interesting. You did mention how Holson came out with their what was it? Where's it in your notes?
The model that you're talking about, the 503
Yeah, it was
G.
like the 503G ACSS, which is interesting because now you have what's cool because you didn't really talk much about it, how it kind of mimics what an LPVO would have
Yeah,
because it's not necessarily a red dot. It has the chevron and it has like little etched marks underneath it, like what a traditional LPVO would have. So this way, it really helps you with your holds, so you're shooting at distance. I believe when I looked at it, it's zeroed for ARs at 100 meters or 100 yards, and I'm like, really? Because I'm a 50 yard zero guy,
I
50 to
know.
200s. I'm like,
Yep.
really? Which at the same, I think that's just what primary arms prefers because that's what my primary arms LPVO is as well. Which is hilarious because I know before you got your Trigicon, you had a Vortex Strike Eagle, which is recommended of the 200 yard zero or 50 yard
Right.
zero. And I know at the time you're like, no, I want to do 100 yards. I'm like, no, I'm 200 yards. So or 50. So it's just hilarious. I'm like, hey, let's switch, but we didn't obviously. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Um. So okay. So I guess this brings up, I guess, actually our next like topic, and this is probably the most important because at this point, people are asking, well, why would you ever want to do a
LPVO
LPVO
in a
versus a
competition,
red
yeah,
dot, right? Because it sounds like the red dot with a magnifier is superior in all ways,
uh huh.
except when it comes to long range shooting. An LPVO
Oh,
is
dominates.
almost always superior in
Like,
every way possible.
oh yeah. I mean, I look back and I've hit 500 meters with my 1 to 6 LPVO. I won't say no problem, but definitely very consistently. I've never done that with my red dot magnifier. Granted, it also is it's a 3x magnifier, so
Hmm.
I cannot even see that far. So
Yeah. So the general consensus is roughly, and people can argue with me. Please do on the internet.
I know,
Appreciate it.
right? Yeah. Gee,
People
thanks.
people argue that for every like X in a magnification, is equal to 100 yards. So if you're shooting at like 300 yards, you want a 3x magnifier or 3x magnification.
Hmm.
If you're shooting at 400 yards, you want a 4x, and so on and so forth.
Do you actually do that?
So that is actually Zombie Invitational last year. We shot out to 500,
Yeah.
and the first year I had that Strike Eagle, which was 1 to 8,
Yep.
and then one of the guys I was with, like, oh, you gotta have minimum 1 to 8. Well, I switched over to the 1 to 6 Credo this year from Trigicon,
Yep.
and I actually did better because the glass was so much cleaner.
Oh, for sure.
And that was a 6x, which falls roughly within that line of 1x per like 100 yards,
Yeah.
right? I had no problem seeing my man-sized target with that, especially because it was really shot up from all day and hadn't been painted.
Hmm.
So yeah, I could tell that because the glass clarity was so good, I could tell the difference between it and like the trees or dirt behind it.
Hmm.
So it's a lot easier to find as
For
a
sure.
result. So again, with the LPVOs, we talk about golden age. We are in a platinum age of LPVOs and BDCs, reticles, that whatever you like want, you can get.
Hmm.
Right. So Primary Arms is probably the first big company to be like, hey, we're gonna create a BDC, so bullet trap compensator, like that's etched into the glass for our LPVOs to make shooting at distances much easier based on the rough trajectory of a 16-inch barrel, 55 grain or 62 grain
Hmm.
with a 1 in 7 twist, right? So it's all rough, right? But you're shooting man-sized targets. As long as you're close, you're going to hit the target.
Hmm.
So it does make it a lot faster. So the idea and the concept behind a BDC is that when you're aiming at the target at a distance, if you know which tick in the reticle is for, let's say you're shooting 500 yards.
Yeah.
If you know what that tick is for 500 yards, you just have to put that tick in that reticle over the target, pull the trigger, and you're set. It's
Hmm.
fast. It's really fast versus using a dial method like they did in the past,
Yep.
or using like a Christmas tree with MOA or mills,
Yeah.
right? Not saying you can't do it, but it's a lot faster with the BDC. And vast majority of competitors use some sort of BDC today.
Oh, for sure.
And that's where it makes it tough. And what Tyler was talking about with the HoloSun 503G, I know we're throwing a lot of numbers at people.
Yeah.
It's
Some
the
phone
AC,
numbers, man.
no, it's the ACSS reticle that's etched,
It like
or that
just
that
came out too, right?
it's actually been out for longer than I thought it was, because
Really?
I found some reviews from like I think 2020.
Oh, that's awkward.
Um, yeah, so it's been out for a hot minute, but most red dots are typically just a dot or a dot with a donut. There's some EOTech. I'm brain farting on the technology, the holographic sites that have like reticles that you can use to range stuff on. But with Primary Arms and them creating that reticle for Holosun, there's a chevron where the tip is where you zero at 100 in this case.
Dude, the thing's been out for forever.
I know if you choose I didn't know. And then there are like three more ticks I think below it that get you out to distances. So again, if you're shooting man-sized target, as long as you can figure out what those different ticks are equal to. So in the case of Holosun, it's like 100 is the top tip of the chevron, and then it's like the first nick down is, or first dot down is 400, 500, and 600. That's basically your effective range of the 5.56. You're not going to see a lot of competition out past that unless you're specifically shooting precision long range
Hmm.
5.56. Most action shooting, 500 is going to be your limit. 600 maybe.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So throw a magnifier behind that. Use those dots for the distances, and as long as you're hitting that seal, you're getting points.
Exactly.
So again, it makes it like, what value is an LPVO?
In a competition where you're shooting 300 plus yards.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And that's really why I still keep LPVO on there, because I even look back how as of right now the only competition I've done that requires me to use, and my AR has been the Wolverine 5K, and I've done that a couple of times. In my first year, I used a red dot magnifier, and I did okay. And the past couple of times I've used just my LPVO, and I did, in my opinion, better. But at the same time, that's also a Tyler who's been shooting for 4 years versus one.
Sure.
So there's definitely a big difference in skill as well. So I need to at least add that in there. But yes, I'm slower up close by half a second, but still. But now I'm comparing it to long distances where it's like, yeah, I man, okay, yeah, I guess I should keep my my LPVO on there.
Well,
Thanks.
that's where it makes it tough. And there, okay, so the big reason is yes, the BDC is etched within the reticle for the optic that we chose for a red dot,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
Or not etched; it's projected in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, anyway, so that is it's there, but there's a few things to consider because again, the optical clarity is not going to be there,
Hmm.
and then you're looking at a red dot that is never going to be as crisp as a etched piece of glass that you get out of an LPVO.
Oh, of course.
Because like for myself, I have an astigmatism. And when I use a red dot, typically see a massive blur. Now there's some things that fix it. The Vulcan actually helps a little bit because it's chevron and the lines help, and I can actually turn the brightness down, but still because that actually helps with astigmatism.
Hmm.
And actually, even when you're using a magnifier, when you do magnify that, it magnifies the astigmatism for everyone, or magnifies the blur that you're going to get.
That's
Even without an
crazy.
astigmatism,
Wow.
you're still going to get a big blur. I was doing some research, but prior to this, I was curious about how stuff looks today, and the general consensus is that the higher quality of the glass of the red dot with matched with your magnifier, you're gonna have a better looking reticle because you're gonna magnify all of those problems that you
Hmm.
have with the red dot. Again, it's usable, but you're never gonna be as accurate. But again, what are we shooting at? Is it a man-sized target? You need to hit a man-sized target, and as long as it's not smeared out past the size of a man-sized target, you're good to go.
Yeah. No, that
But
that makes a lot of sense.
it'll never be as accurate as an LPVO.
No, of course not. There's just no way, not a distance. And that's where the LPVO is just absolutely superior to a red dot. It's once
Yep.
you go at distance.
Yeah, and you're also stuck at 5x, for example, or 6x, depending on the magnifier you're using.
Hmm.
You're stuck at that, right? Or you're at 1x.
I mean, like, I'm gonna be real with you, Phil. I feel like on my LPVO, that's all I do. It's one or
Well, and
six.
that's a great point because if you're using a second focal plane LPVO, which most people do,
Hmm.
the only advantage that you get by not using its maximum like magnification is if like you just need a little bit of magnification to hit
Yeah,
something at like 300,
yeah.
right? But you're still shooting like at your center dot.
Like, the only time, or one of the few times that I've used my 3x is because it's like you, me, and the other guys are like a firing line, and and I'm doing a 3x, so this way I know I'm actually aiming at my target and not your target next to it.
Right.
Because I've done that before. I'm like, oh, I just shot at Phil's target, or I just shot at Brent's target because I was so zoomed in that I didn't see it. So,
Yeah, that's actually a great point because that gives you if you're at 3x, that gives you better field of view no matter what
yes,
at 6x, right?
exactly.
Um, because your field of view is with 1x is going to be whatever your default field of view is, right?
Hmm.
With a red dot and with both eyes open.
Yes.
Um, whereas obviously that's a little bit different on LPVO if you have both eyes open, blah blah whatever. But if you put that, as soon as you move over that magnifier, as soon as you move that over, you are now stuck into that field of view
Hmm.
um, at the maximum magnification. Whereas with LPVO, you do get a little bit more ability to
Yeah.
adjust that.
And speaking of closing eyes, I think of I'm just talking about just the red dot by itself. Like whenever I transition shoulders, I need to close my left eye when I use my LPVO. But if
Yeah.
I'm using a red dot, I have no issues. I can leave both eyes open just fine. Now, once I put the magnifier on, that's where I gotta close my left eye as well. So
Yep. and most people do that, myself included.
Hmm.
Even when I'm shooting at like with LPVO long distance, I'm always closing my non-dominant eye.
It depends for me. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So I guess it just really depends. I guess how far. I mean, if it's at 500 yards, then I'm definitely closing my non-dominant eye. I can't be a Chris Kyle, right?
I know, right? Um,
The
yeah. So the other thing I will say is with my only downfall with the Trigicon that I have is that the hashes are not as defined as they should be. Now there's
mm,
advantages to that because they're not as they're thin, so you can get a bit more accurate. But I don't feel like it's as fast for me to acquire a target as a bright dot would be on a red dot.
oh, for sure. And now that I think about it, kind of going back to um, eye relief, I think of how shooting in non. Oh man, what's the word I'm looking for?
Non-standard positions.
Yeah, non-standard positions, like
Hmm.
even just shooting prone of all things, or like I mean, we've shooting under car, like fetal positions or whatever, different, not just weird positions. So of course, with a LPVO, like you've got crazy scope shadow,
Yeah.
man.
Well, I had a problem with that. If you we talked about in a previous episode with the Wolverine
That's
5K and my
right.
Strike Eagle, where the
Yeah,
eye box was not as good as the Trigicon, where you were hitting targets like crazy with your red dot, and I'm like,
yeah,
dude, I can't even find the friggin' target
exactly. It was
because
crazy.
it was a non-standard shooting position,
Hmm.
and I was suffering from scope shadow.
And and I think we're on a moving vehicle as well.
Yeah, we were on a moving vehicle.
Uh
Now, a lot of this can be resolved by having an offset red dot with your LPVO.
huh.
So that's a whole nother bag of
Uh-huh, which
cats. I'm not sure I want to open,
I have
but
I'll admit
mm,
I haven't done it. I'm back and forth. I've considered it, I've contemplated it, but I haven't really pulled the trigger yet on it. Because I know you've been back and forth about it. I know Brent and Daryl,
yeah,
they love it. That's what they
yep.
do. So,
Yeah, I've got a right now I've got an offset on there.
mhm.
I need for the zombie invitational I gotta do some practice with that going into it. But okay, so any other thoughts before we kind of close out and give closing thoughts?
How'd you forget about the most important topic of all?
The answer to the question?
No.
Oh.
Which one looks cooler?
Oh, well that's fair. Well, that depends on what year
It's
it
so
is.
true.
Because okay, so there's something very sexy, for lack of a better word, about a SBR with a red dot on it. A red dot alone, right?
Which is hilarious because I feel like a SBR or a AR pistol with LPVO looks better. It's
I mean,
so
it does because it's like whatever
it's
the
so
current.
subjective, man.
It's like styles. They go in and out, right? Like for the longest time, like in the early like 2010s, red dots with LP or red dots with magnifiers were all the hotness, and everybody was having them and showing off their rifles, and you were on whatever forum it was because Instagram probably didn't exist back then.
Hmm.
And it was all red dots with magnifiers.
For
Now
sure.
it's all LPVOs.
Hmm.
But I feel like we're getting back. I feel like it's coming back in that
It
direction.
might be, man. It might be going back to just red dots or red dot magnifier. I feel like I'm leaning towards it. I'm still, I don't know. I'm pretty close. I feel like I'm on the fence again.
Yeah. Well, again, a lot of the even beyond this way that it looks, a lot of the problems that an LPVO solved that were superior over red dot have now been solved by red dots with magnifiers.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like when I first got into this, I have a primary arms like 3x magnifier. It is one of the early ones and it is not great.
Yeah, I've
It
borrowed
works.
it.
I know it's not great, but it works,
Hmm.
right? It works. The way that Tyler was talking about earlier with having to moving the magnifier in and out, off to the side and having hang off messes with the balance of your rifle. But Unity Mount
Yes.
has fixed that problem,
That is true,
right?
yeah. I didn't even think about the
Now,
balance aspect. That's
yep,
so true.
yep. So those two problems, which are major issues for those people that really get into shooting, especially like shooting competition, where a lot of those things matter and it helps you get a better score. Um, I've been really kind of that gap has been closed between LPVO and red dot and a magnifier. And again, the other issue was the magnification range. It used to be that 3x was all you got because the
Hmm.
clarity was not there.
Yep.
But now we are in an age where that is not necessarily the case anymore. The clarity on will never be as good as an LPVO, but the clarity on a lot of magnifiers has gotten a lot better.
Hmm.
Especially the EOTech. The G45 is really clear.
That's
It's nice,
awesome.
but it's expensive. Oh, the other thing we never touched on at all, Tyler, was the cost. So before we kind of get into our closing thoughts and which ones we think are better, um, the cost of the Trijicon LPVO Credo HX 1 to 6 that I have second focal plane is about $900. I think I paid 8 something for it, but I was like stacking deals on top of deals during holiday purchases. That's $900. So Holosun, the red dot itself is $250 on Amazon.
Yep.
The primary arms GLX 6X magnifier was $300 right now on primary arms website for $550 right now. So that is a significant cost reduction versus an LPVO. I didn't even include the cost of the mount
Hmm.
for my LPVO, which is another 100 and some bucks. So we're over $1,000 there.
Hmm.
Both the Holosun and the primary arms come with a mount to use. Now, granted, you'd probably want to swap that out for a Unity mount at some point until it's going to increase your costs.
Dude, yeah.
But,
And
but
but keep in
you,
mind too, with the Unity mount, you need both Unity mounts, and you're looking at like $600.
yeah, but you can start with those and use it until you can potentially afford down the road to purchase said Unity mount.
Hmm.
And if you buy the red dot, you can use the red dot until you can afford the magnifier. You don't have to buy it all at once.
That's very true. And at the same time too, like you can even get a cheaper Holliston. Like that's what I have. I have like a 403B or whatever. That's like
Right?
$120.
Doesn't have a BDC on it though.
It does not. But I don't want.
Okay.
What if I don't want the BDC?
Yep. So let's say you want to step up to premium glass.
Oh, for sure.
EOTech G45 5X magnifier, $550 the magnifier, which puts you at $800 total before any kind of Unity mount. With that and the Unity mount for both, you're going to be over the cost of your LPVO, or roughly about the same.
Hmm.
But again, you can still buy the red dot first and use it for whatever,
Yeah.
and then save up for buying the magnification that you need.
Which is hilarious because that's what I did. I started with a red dot, then bought a magnifier, and eventually I was like, I want an LPVO.
That is the way I always recommend new rifle owners, new
Oh,
carbine, buy an
100%.
AR-15,
Hmm.
red dot. Because what are they using it for? Home defense or whatever. Whereas we're using it
Typically,
for
yes.
competition. Yeah,
Hmm.
and like where we live, Michigan, you're not home defense. You're going to be shooting point blank, right? In like let's say SHTF scenario, Michigan, you're not going to get out past 200 yards most likely,
No,
unless you're shooting down a street, in which case, baby. But
yeah,
why are you defensively shooting down a street that far? Unless there's a
exactly.
horde of zombies coming at you,
I guess, but even then, at that point, like you want to keep quiet anyway, so it should be once they get closer. So,
right?
assuming that's how zombies work in movies, or like how they work in movies is how they will work in real life, which I don't think they ever will, but we'll see. Knock on everything, right?
But that's why I got a suppressor, bro. Because
Mm,
clearly all suppressors are movie whisper quiet.
in a 300 blackout subsonic, sure.
Yeah.
Which I gotta take care of. I gotta get a suppressor, man.
Hey, wait times are way down right now.
Yeah, I gotta get a tree chopped down first.
I know life always gets in the way.
It really does.
All right, I feel like I've been talking a lot. Tyler, any other thoughts on this before we come to a conclusion, or each our
I
own conclusion?
That's all I've got, man. I don't even know what, like, I think we've kind of covered everything. I can't really think of anything else. I mean, I kind of answered my conclusion. It's whatever I shot last, unfortunately. So I'm so
Yeah.
50-50. I feel like it just
E-
depends on what mood I'm in or what's my context. Like, how far am I going to shoot?
right.
So I guess in a competition where if I know I'm shooting more than 200 yards, it's going to be LPVO. If it's under 200 yards, red dot, not even a question. I feel like
So
that's my answer. I think right now I'm just leaning towards LPVO because I can get away with like the split second when it's closer within the 200 yards at the 1x, that's fine, but it just dominates once I start having to go beyond the 300 yards.
right,
So that's where I'm like, right now, I guess I am still LPVO. And that's where maybe I should learn how to, maybe I should just get that offset and learn how to do that. Maybe that's where you kind of somewhat compromise, but I don't know. I feel like I'd rather just stick with just LPVO by itself. Is that the right answer? I don't know, because at the same time, now too, with me being a 50-yard zero guy, I need to know my holds. I need to realize, like, hey,
right.
within, if I'm in like 20 yards or in, I need to know, like, hey, I gotta, what was it, aim a couple inches high. Yep, I gotta aim a couple inches high to make sure I actually get in the A zone, or if I'd have to head box. So that's kind of where I'm at. What about you, Philip?
Okay, so I look at if you break down a competition, you break it down by points,
Yes,
right? So the vast majority of competitions, you're going to be shooting a carbine or anything. Well, okay, I guess a carbine. Typically between 100 yards and 200 yards,
for sure.
because there's not a lot of like ranges that have the ability with multiple stages or multiple bays to be able to shoot at distances past 200, 100, 200 at like at every single bay, right? I think of the Zombie Invitational because that's using kind of as our example here. They have a few stages you can kind of get out there with, but a lot of them are close in. So again, we talk about points. What is the way that you can rack up the most points within a match? And that is going to be, if you're gaming it, because it's a match, we're gaming it, you're going to be shooting up close,
Hmm.
right? Within 100 yards. And that is where a red dot is like really superior,
Oh, no
right?
question.
You're going to rack up tons more points. And then if they're faster on all of those points, it's a lot more points to make than those very small amount of points that go 300 and beyond, right? So if you can deal with a really great sighting solution for the vast majority of the points and have a really kind of crappy experience out at like 300 and beyond, in theory, you're going to make a lot more points with a red dot and a magnifier combo.
Yeah.
However, there is something to be said about optical clarity that you get out of an LPVO that for some reason, if a lot of matches, if you're shooting at a match, a lot of bays do go out to 100 and they're going to put steel up because steel is easier to reset, right? And realistically, you should not be shooting steel, and I get arguments on this with a AR-15 at 100. 100 should be the minimum the distance that you're shooting it at. Now, if you have it properly set up and canted, 75 is probably okay, and people even say 50 is okay. I don't mess around with that. 75 is kind of my very bare minimum, and I prefer 100. And if you're doing that and you're shooting at that, and if you do have, like, if you're using 3x or whatever to kind of get a little bit tighter shots, let's say the targets are a little bit smaller, there is a chance the LPVO is going to be a lot better for you. And when I started this podcast off, my answer to this solution was a red dot and a magnifier, and now I've gone back to a LPVO
I know, right?
because I think, and the reason is that I personally invested in a like the Trigicon because I wanted to not have to worry about what I was going to do, and I wanted to get that like as close to a red dot as possible. And if I think about it, I have gotten it really darn close. And I'm still gonna have to say it's gonna be an LPVO for me, despite all of the things that we had against the LPVO that the
I
red dot clearly won
know.
out on. But there are butts. There are butts all over the place here. This is it's a very butt-filled room.
Oh, okay.
Okay. If you're shooting a match that is 50 yards and in, red dot all day, every day.
Oh, not even a question. Yeah.
Yep. If you're shooting a night vision match, red dot all day, every day. You
Mhm.
can't get your night vision behind if you're shooting, especially if you're
You
shooting
can't see,
passively.
man,
You
no.
can't get it behind an LPVO.
Good
You
luck.
gotta have that red dot way out there.
Mhm.
Either way, I think you'd be fine. I'm almost tempted to try to bring a different upper with me next time I go that has a red dot and a magnifier on it, just to kind of try to compare the two, just to see like run the stages back to back.
I know, I mean, all I've got's my I could just bring my 300 blackout with me that's got a red dot on it.
I know.
And
Or
just
I have a 16 inch that we can take
I
I have the
know, I
there's a
mean,
hollow sun on it.
I have
You
my
can put on a
18-inch, I just hate that thing. It's heavy.
yeah. But I think again, you could shoot a match like Zombie Invitational with both setups and be just fine,
Yeah.
right? And again, the other thing I was thinking about the Zombie Invitational with the optical clarity of a red dot is again there's a forest stage where like it's hard to pick out the targets. And when you have that slightly blue hint, it does throw you off just enough to be able to identify those targets. And having just that like even putting your thing at 2x or 3x is just enough magnification to distinguish what your target is. So I'm gonna have to go with LPVO, man,
I
with a offset red dot.
I know, right? Well, okay, wow, so both, got it.
Yep.
Wow. It took us an hour to come to that conclusion. The answer's both.
Yes. The answer is both. All
Uh,
right, Tyler. Let's start closing this out. Unless you have any more comments.
that's all I got. So what's your dad advice?
Oh, I was gonna ask you what your dad advice
Oh, I
was.
know, but I beat you to it.
Okay. I feel like I've been talking a lot of this episode because I had to do a lot of research going into it. But when it comes to the use of a red dot and a magnifier and LPVO, there's a lot of flexibility between the two. So my advice in general is to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
As humans, we tend to want to remain status quo.
Yeah.
We don't want to get out and leave our homes and go do things. We want to stay at home and watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
That is not very healthy for us, though.
No.
And it is difficult to get out and go do stuff,
Especially when it's 90 degrees and humid outside.
especially when it's 90 degrees. Maybe in that case, stay home and don't be
Yeah, dude,
flexible.
it's been hot. Let's be real.
But be flexible
Yes.
and be willing to try new things. And if somebody's like, hey, I want to go out and do this, go get Taco Bell for lunch, say, say yes and have fun because you never know what you're gonna have experiences for that you'll have missed out on before.
Yeah.
But see, this is why I'm using this example because there's no real answer to this. But don't be flexible to the point where you bump up against your morals,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
right? Like if somebody's saying, "Hey, let's go out and smoke pot," it's up to you if you want to do it or not. But like for me, I'm not going to do it. That's just not what I do.
Especially as gun owners, because
Yeah, because that's a
federally, that will
violation.
not work out for us. Just saying.
Exactly. Yep. All right, Tyler, what's your dad advice?
The power of a pause is so important. For us as humans, I feel like we are natural people pleasers, so it's really easy to say yes very early on, right away whenever someone asks you to do something or try to plan something out or try to get you either way. It's just learning how to pause or just learn how to say, "Let me get back to you. Let me think about that. Let me check my schedule. Let me double check." Instead of naturally trying to say yes, trying to commit yourselves before you even thought it through. So just learn how to pause. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, let me get back to you later. Because even for me as a natural people pleaser, it's something that I've learned that I've continually have to improve on for myself. So really that's dad advice to me to remind. So this
Hmm.
way I'm not always just running myself into the ground because I'm saying yes to everything without even thinking about it. So learn how to pause, learn how to say, let me get back to you.
Yeah, and I think along that, it seems like that our advice are almost opposed to each other, but I would disagree. I would say that they go hand in hand
Hmm.
because you can be flexible, like I said, to the point where you break.
Yep.
Um, and again, you can be inflexible enough where you never do anything.
Exactly.
I personally have experienced a lot of like overcommitment in the past like
Oh, yeah, same.
6 months, and sometimes you have to frame what is going on and realizing that if you keep saying yes to everything, then things are going to get stacked up. You're going to get stressed out and you're not going to be able to do the stuff that truly matters.
Exactly.
So the other thing around saying or you're pausing and saying no or saying
Just let me
like even
double
if you,
check.
yeah, even if you say yes, like give it a massive something advice for myself. Give it a massive window of possibility for that to be completed
Yeah.
because you never know when life's going to get in the way.
That's so true. I used to like try to schedule everything by the minute. And that's why, okay, I'm going to be real with you, Phil. And I know Brett and Daryl are probably listening to this. I know you guys always joke around with me being late. A big reason is for that is because I try to cram everything in. And because
Yeah,
of that, I'm late a lot because I always think I have time to do that task. I have time to do this and that. And a lot of times because of that, it's like, no, I don't. Put that down and just leave already because I'd rather be early because I need to because I do I respect those because if I have a deadline or if I have a time frame, I can say like I want to show that their time's important too. That I don't want to be late because now I'm saying your time's not important. I'm more important because that's not true. We're all equals, you know. So I
right.
want to be respectful to others and really to myself too because I'm saying I'm committing to show up at this time. I get it, emergencies happen, things happen. I get that traffic happens, whatever. But if I'm like 30 minutes late, like come on, man. So
Yeah, and a lot of that too is I like how this advice section is going long. I'm okay with that.
100%.
A lot of that too is we will say yes to a lot of stuff
Hmm.
and be overly flexible.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Or overcommit. I guess
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that.
Hmm.
Overcommit to something to the point that we are starting to be unhealthy in the other direction.
Oh yeah.
It is unhealthy to not do anything at all, but it's also unhealthy to do too many things.
Exactly.
And when your sleep starts suffering, as we as we do this podcast at 12,
Dude, it's like
12:30 a.m.
12:30, man.
I
It
know
was an insane day.
it was a long day.
It was a crazy day, man. I didn't
Um,
get home until what, 10 o'clock, 10:30?
yeah, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was a crazy day today.
But yeah, get your sleep. It's important.
Yes,
Like I was gone on vacation all week last week, and I think I slept like on average probably 4 hours a night. It was not good,
I believe it.
but it was fun and it was worth it for that time period,
Oh,
right?
totally. I mean, that's how it was in Guyana for me. Like it's different. That's a whole other story. But when you kind of get back to regular life, it's like, hey, let's get back. I get. I know some people say like, I can't get the 8 hours of sleep. I'm like, I'd say there are some people. Yes, I totally get it. There are others. I'm like, what's your what's your phone usage look like? And I myself included. I'm lumping myself to that too. I'm like, it's one thing that I have decided I need to recommit to is just make sure I don't have my phone in my room. So this way, I just go to bed instead of like doom scrolling through Facebook or YouTube or Instagram. Wow. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, it's like I don't need my phone. All that blue light's just messing me up anyway. So I'm like, I don't need that
Yeah,
because
that's
it's.
interesting. So I actually I do a little bit of the opposite.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't. I sometimes I do doom scroll, and I think the problem with doom scrolling is that you get these little stimulations over and over and over again, and you want to keep going,
Mhm.
and it keeps you awake instead of going to sleep.
Exactly.
I have done other things though. Long format content will put me to sleep.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Nothing fancy stuff. For the longest time, I used to watch a lot of his stuff and his reviews because they would put me to sleep.
Mhm.
If I couldn't sleep, I'd watch his stuff. I'd leave the phone on, and it would eventually, I would at some point wake up, turn it off, and go to
That's
bed.
hilarious.
So I'd watch his stuff. Now I do, like I play card games on my
Mhm.
phone before bed to make my brain tired.
That makes sense.
And like for some reason, I have slept fantastic the past 2 years by playing a game of cards before bed every night on my phone.
That's
I
awesome.
cannot explain it, but it works for me.
Dude, if it works for you, it works for you. And that's
Yep.
where social media has it's the mini dopamine hits. That's what it is. And that's
Right.
why I just have to be so careful with that. So I'm like, oh, I'm literally getting these. That's why they have these quick cuts. That's what they're designed to do. YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, all of it, TikTok, how they're designed to do that to make you addicted because of the mini dopamine hits. So
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
but that
All right.
that's all I got.
That's all I've got. Thanks for listening. We hope that you found our episode about LPVO versus red dot with magnifier head to head useful, even though we were very non-committal in our
I feel
our
like that's
answers.
everyone's answer though, because they don't know either.
Again, I think the answer is Tyler. Spend a whole crap ton of money on the highest quality LPVO that you can get. If we're all rolling around with EOTechs and like super high end primary arms, PLX scopes, we'll all
Hmm.
be happy.
Actually, what I'm learning is,
Primary arms sponsor us.
yeah, I know, right? Of course, I'm single, but I'm saying for those who are married, get yourself a red dot magnifier full rifle, and then for your wife, get them an upper with an LPVO for their birthdays.
Problem solved.
Perfect.
Tyler, I think that's the answer.
That's totally the answer.
With that,
Good
let's end this
luck.
podcast.
Exactly. So remember to like, comment, follow, subscribe, give us a rating, 5-star review if you enjoyed it. And yeah, that's all I got.
Peace out.
Have a great night.